Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChatArgos, the blockchain intelligence firm that was made famous for outing Binance's BUSD under collateralization by $1.4 billion. With me as usual every week is Jonathan Reiter, our CEO. We got a couple things for you. This is going to be our last episode for the year, so thank you for tuning in. Thank you for taking the time out. Thank you for the comments, the likes, and the subscriptions. We're going to talk about the S&P Stablecoin Framework. Very interesting about that, about how they are making some kind of attempt to do some kind of a rating. I think it is a rating, right? Yeah, because they've got numbers from 1 to 5 to rate stablecoins just to see how bad they are or how good they are. Nobody got 1 though.
Correct.
So anyway, 1 being the best and 5 being, well,
Someone did get a 5.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get to that. Then we'll talk about the ledger hack, and yeah, that's a whole mess. Anyway, we'll get to that, and then we'll talk about the ETF cash creation redemption thing and what does that mean? What's all this stuff you've been hearing about on the crypto Twitter and stuff like that? What is the real implications of this whole thing? I'm not an expert on this, but John will explain this to us. So let's just jump straight into the S&P Stablecoin framework for rating stablecoins.
So they released a framework and a rating for 7 or 8 whatever stablecoins 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a few weeks ago.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. 12th, I think.
So they are. I mean, the first thing to say is they state that they are not going to rate algorithmic stablecoins. The exact phrase is something like coins primarily backed by endogenous collateral. So I think that's a way of saying stuff that looks like Luna UST. We'll come back to exactly what's going on there in a second.
Yeah, I don't think they know. I don't think they understand the words that are coming out of their own mouths.
I think they may have misinterpreted their own rules. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But the focus is supposed to be things that are backed by stuff that's pretty much dollars and seeing how well that's set up. And that's a very classic structured finance credit rating type situation. Bankruptcy remoteness, quality of the collateral, amount of over collateralization, independent third party, the kind of stuff that traditionally rating agencies are, that is exactly the middle of their wheelhouse. So it's interesting that of the coins that they rated, so USDC, USDP, this kind of stuff, I think they rated FDUSD and TUSD, which got lower ratings than USDC and whatever, USDP. Looking at, do they disclose how much money they have, where the money is, what kind of treasury bills or
funny thing is,
stuff is.
I mean, they rated DAI as well.
Oh, well, okay, so they also rated DAI and Frax. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
But it makes a lot of sense for them to look at this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very simple things, trust arrangement, independent trustee, whatever. Nobody got the top rating.
Nobody got 1. So if you think USDC got a 1, you're wrong.
Yeah. So the traditionally considered to be good American domestic regulated license, whatever ones, USDP, USDC, got 2s.
2's okay.
2's okay, yeah. I mean, to some extent, it's a little bit fair that there are regulatory limits on how much they can know about bankruptcy remoteness for some of these things, because they'd have to go register as securities, but apparently they're allowed to run without registering as securities, so that's kind of not their fault. To be fair, if they went and registered everything as a security, they would then have access to those protections, and I think S&P would give them a 1 immediately. Their product would also not be usable on a permissionless ledger, but that's where we are, right? There is a route.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, and it's nice to see someone sort of formally looking at that stuff using principles that are similar to regular old finance evaluations. I mean, T-bills are rated AAA versus corporate bonds that have whatever rating, and this is that kind of collateral analysis is exactly their thing. Now they also looked at DAI and Frax. I believe DAI got a 4 out of 5, and Frax got a 5 out of 5. So they say that they don't rate, endogenous collateral, primarily endogenous collateral backed stablecoins. It's interesting. I think maybe there needs to be a little more elaboration on what's going on here, because both of those in the limit are backed by endogenous collateral. So the bottom step of the waterfall for Maker is the issuance of Maker tokens. You can argue that the over-collateralization is sufficient that that's unlikely, and that's fair enough, but that step does not exist at all for USDC. And I think that people do need to draw a clearer line here, because understanding the stability of an equilibrium relationship with some kind of potentially infinitely issued token supply-demand balance is fundamentally different than understanding, are these real-world assets owned in a way that's reasonably well tied to the tokens? I was going to say tethered to the tokens. what's the quality of the assets that they hold? Those are traditional finance questions that these guys are very well equipped to answer. No one is particularly well equipped to answer the question, is this particular governance token issuance schedule in a stable equilibrium long term with respect to this ecosystem? That's a challenging question that is nothing like evaluating traditional finance. I think maybe people need to draw the line a little bit closer to the stuff that they're used to.
And that's why I think I've got a I don't I have a problem with both of those things sitting on the same rating scale. Yeah. I mean, like, you have, on the one hand, what are clearly algorithmic stablecoins. I mean, maybe they have a different interpretation of endogenous. I don't know, but you have stuff like DAI, Frax, sitting on the same scale as USDC. I mean, the easy way to understand this is apples to oranges. But I guess to give you another analogy, it's like trying to rate the cleanliness of a slaughterhouse and a McDonald's. Similar. Similar, same, conceptually the same thing.
I mean, they gave the same rating to FDUSD and to DAI, and maybe in some vague sense that's reasonable, but the issues there are completely different.
That's what I'm saying.
FDUSD claims to own a bunch of dollars, and the questions are exactly how those dollars are owned and where they are. DAI does have dollar collateral, but it has other stuff, and in the limit, they issue governance tokens to back things if the auctions fail. FDUSD, if their money is seized, will not give you your money back. But there is no auction procedure. It's a fundamentally different set of problems.
I mean, it's just a totally different thing. It's like I said, back to the the slaughterhouse fast food chain analogy. Both of them are processing food at various stages of preparation. But I don't think I would use the same set of rules. Like, the cleanliness of McDonald's could not be applied to a slaughterhouse, because if it was, everybody who ate anything that came out, that thing would be dead.
So there are hygiene, there are inspections for both meat packing and restaurant facilities, and the rules aren't the same.
No, they're not the same.
Maybe not exactly the same situation here, but no, there's a way in which that's a similar distinction.
And it makes things easier to understand, right? Because you have these two things that are on the same scale. It's like you don't expect a fast food chain to be on the Michelin guide with the world's finest restaurants. It's just completely different things. You know what I mean?
Oh, but at the same time, a place that's serving 5,000 customers a day, you'd hope is cleaner than a place that's serving 80.
You would.
You have to, or it's
you
a
would.
mess.
You would. But you'd be wrong.
Yeah. Well, okay. Anyway, I think the TLDR here is, I think we would like to see a clearer delineation of stuff that is an economics, equilibrium, computer science, complicated problem that is about stablecoin oddness, distinct from the traditional finance and legal issues related to primarily government bond, high quality collateral, whatever, backed stablecoins. And conflating those on any level is going to cause trouble, because, during a period of time, the governance process for Frax and DAI in this case could decide to change the collateral terms in ways that massively degrade what's going on, in a way that's just fundamentally different. That USDC is not going to decide they're accepting Bitcoin collateral. I mean, this is not a that's not a possibility.
But I guess
we're getting there. Like,
Moody's
so had released a framework. There are frameworks that are slowly starting to look. Like they might be okay.
Big ups for effort.
You can start somewhere. It's okay.
You gotta, so we're getting there.
And it is challenging in that many projects, consciously or unconsciously or unknowingly, somewhat misrepresent the way they work themselves. So it is difficult to figure out how a lot of these products function.
Okay, moving on. Ledger hack.
So this is what, a week and a half ago or so?
We didn't cover it in the last episode.
We covered a little bit.
Yeah, but let's...
Well, they responded in a way that is now extremely confusing.
Yeah.
So
give them. Let's go into the background about the hack.
6-8 months ago, earlier this year, Ledger had an incident where it was made clear that given certain updates to their firmware, they would be able to have access to your private keys, extract your private keys, and that while your private keys that were supposed to be on the device only were not in fact leaked, it was made very clear to everyone that Ledger could do something to affect a leaking of those keys. It would require them to have basically lied to you and published software that does things they promised not to do, but that can happen, and their software is not open source, so okay. There is an element of trust there, and even if you trust them, if you thought that trust wasn't necessary, that would be concerning to you. So fine. Now, We fast forward to a week and a half ago. Is an incident where I believe an employee or a former employee was as a phishing attack from a former employee, and somebody published a malicious JavaScript package, so some software, and that stole some people's tokens. There was some theft associated. We talked about that a little bit.
Yep.
Now, Ledger is asserting that, first of all, they're going to make these people whole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine, whatever. That's not a security question, really. And that they're going to try to make changes in the future so that nobody is doing things. Blind signing is the sort of casual term that's used. So there is supposed to be a facility for your hardware wallet for you to know exactly what transaction you're signing through, a display on the device or some kind of trusted connection, and you're only signing one thing at a time, as opposed to, going to OpenSea and authorizing transfers up to X, and then, somebody can take the money. So that's where we are. They made that promise a couple days ago that they would come up with stuff, and they're discouraging people from using certain types of blind or blinder signings. Okay, now I will reference back to the earlier firmware update issue and note that in this case, someone effectively had Ledger-owned keys compromised. So if I can get access to publishing a questionable JavaScript package within Ledger, conceptually, that's the same as me getting access to publishing dodgy firmware.
Yep.
And if I can publish dodgy firmware, there is no reason for you to trust what it says on the LED display on your fancy signing thumb drive. And that's not a theoretical problem.
It's an actual problem.
Had this person fished for different keys, they could have collapsed the entire thing.
Yes.
I don't know whether they couldn't do that, didn't know anybody in that area, or didn't understand that that was possible. If you're watching this video, I'm not sure if I should say congratulations or not. That could have been a much larger issue, and it is very much front of mind now. And Ledger seems to be, again, making promises that they cannot deliver on because their firmware is upgradable.
Okay, so for people who have never used or operated a Ledger before, let's just go like really simple stuff. It's basically like a USB stick. It has a little screen in it, and there's a very small little program inside it. Which is what this whole firmware is. And the idea behind it was that, okay, if you've got your crypto, you don't want to leave it on a computer with internet access. You want to just put it onto this little thumb drive with a little window and like bunch of buttons and like pass keys and stuff like that. So it made you think that, okay, all my money is inside this pen drive, and I feel safe. But the problem is that periodically you need to connect that if you want to transact, because you can't transact with the USB stick on its own.
Okay, there's two related problems here.
Yeah.
The first is, at some point, the secret bits have to get to a computer attached to the internet so you can do something with them. That's what you're talking about. Now that process, to some extent, you have to trust there's no data going in both directions. There are ways, I think we talked about this months ago.
Yeah.
You want to be really, really pessimistic, print your bits onto a CD-ROM, right, and then move that CD-ROM. There are ways to affect the one-way transfer of data like that that are okay. And Ledger could promise that their system doesn't allow updates other direction. Fine. Now, step two is that the computer he's describing runs software, and that software is upgradable.
It's the same like upgradable smart contracts. Remember we talked about this in a different context. Yeah. The minute the software inside your little pen drive is upgradable, it's susceptible to exactly what has happened.
Yeah, and I find it astonishing that they're promising to rely more on the stuff in the device when previously they had an incident where people were concerned about what's in their firmware, and this time they had an incident with what's in their signing keys. Their firmware is published via a set of firmware, whatever, signing keys. If someone phishing attacks and gets those keys, they can publish dodgy firmware. There is no way out of this box. I mean, the closest you can get to getting out of this box is to have devices that are not upgradable.
Yep.
Okay, that is a thing. Every time a new blockchain comes out or you want to add new features, you have to buy a new device and somehow transfer everything over.
It's not a bad business model.
I mean, well, it is what it is, right? I mean,
and the tagline could be
not that expensive.
Tagline could be, "What's in your firmware?"
Well, I mean, firmware security and automated updates are things that the serious computer security world, and I guess there's a little bit of shade on the blockchain community in this comment, the serious computer security world, I mean, like the National Security
Yeah,
Agency,
yeah.
the people that run Amazon and Google's data centers.
Like Jack Ryan.
Even stuff that's used for, firmware in cars and whatnot.
Yeah,
There's a lot
yeah.
of work to make sure that you can't have malicious updates and problems because it's, airplanes have
Because
firmware.
otherwise you get that thing like in that movie with Julia Roberts. What was that movie? Leave the World Behind or something like that.
Just think of it as cloud providers and airplane manufacturers and whatnot would really like to be sure that their supply chain for
that's
software
exactly the plot.
is much more secure. And so these are challenging problems. There are no easy answers to these problems. But promising people, again, that you're going to do stuff that's just not possible, yeah, that's maybe not a great look.
I still think it's a good tagline though.
You can work in their marketing department.
All right, finally, let's talk about this ETF cash creation redemption. I'm a complete Luddite when it comes to that kind of thing, so talk us through it.
So the way that the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust works at the moment, we start from this.
Yeah, we talked about this before.
You can send in Bitcoin and they give you shares of the trust.
Yes.
But you cannot return your shares of the trust and collect Bitcoin.
Yes.
Fine. Most ETFs in the world and most exchange-traded products of various sorts allow you to put in the underlying securities, commodities, whatever, and then take out the underlying securities, commodities if you want.
Yes.
S&P index stuff for years. People have done the underlying basket versus the index in all kinds of different guises. This works for bond futures, commodity futures. These are features of lots and lots of exchange-traded products, and I don't even mean exchange-traded products like stuff on the stock exchange. I also mean in cases of bonds and futures and all kinds of things. Fine. Now, in the case of Bitcoin, there is some idea now that the SEC does not want to allow people to send in Bitcoin and take out Bitcoin, and they want everything to have to pass through a conversion to and from dollars from and to Bitcoin type of a process, cash creation. So this is a little bit strange. I should say first, economically, of course, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
Because if I have $100 and I want to buy whatever, a share of this fund for $100, and I give you $100 and you convert it to Bitcoin and put it in the trust, it doesn't matter if I started with $100, bought a Bitcoin and sent it in, or if I had a Bitcoin, sold it, had the dollars, gave them to you, and you bought the Bitcoin back. So there's nothing really economically significant going on here. There's more transactions, there may be more cost, there may be more friction, whatever. Similarly for redemption, I wouldn't get my coins back. They would, the trustee, whatever, the operator, would take them out of the trust, sell them, and give me the money.
Yeah.
If I wished to have Bitcoin, I would simply go buy the Bitcoin with the money. So again, overall, the flow is flat. The simplest reason that I can think of that this would be, while it's economically meaningless, it's not meaningless, right?
Yeah.
You now have a registered securities broker-dealer type guy in the middle buying and selling these Bitcoin, and that person presumably is having to comply with some kind of KYC AML requirements. So it would kind of help ensure that the contents of the trust are not really dodgy.
Yeah.
So say I'm a guy that has a bunch of X Silk Road Bitcoin that can't really be used. I can't send them to my securities broker. Okay. I'd have to go find an exchange and, sell them for dollars or wash them through an exchange, send them to somewhere else. It's not clear to me that instituting this process really fixes that problem. It just expels that problem further out of the U.S. financial system. So I have some dodgy.
Well, but that's maybe the goal here.
It's a fair point that that's maybe the goal, right? So I have my dodgy whatever Bitcoin, and I couldn't have sent those in anyway. So I go to some offshore exchange and sell them for dollars and wire the dollars in, and somehow I have to, clean those dollars up. Enough people will take them. But yeah, it erects another wall to keep the contents of a bunch of regulated U.S. stuff from being connected to things that are too dirty. Yeah, maybe that's the goal. Economically, it doesn't mean anything. So
building walls.
Well, okay. Anyway, this is within the financial markets, but yes. I don't know why people are so excited about this extra feature.
Americans get excited when they build walls.
All right. I mean more that this is an economically meaningless smokescreen that will put one more step of separation between this part of the financial system and the sort of wild on-chain stuff.
I understand it. I mean, like, the idea is that, look, and that's, I feel at least, that for the most part, that seems to have been what the U.S. financial system, or at least the regulators seem to have been going for.
Well, so, people may not remember there were deliverable futures on, it was Bitcoin, ETH, maybe it was just Bitcoin, ETH, on ICE
Yeah.
that used backed,
Yep,
and they
yep,
were
yep, yep,
deliverable,
yep, yep.
and you simply had to meet backed. This is futures, not ETF,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
still, it was a
Deliverable
huge
futures, yeah.
conglomerate that was taking custody of all
It
sorts of
never
stuff.
took off.
Yeah, presumably because the requirements for making sure the tokens were clean were too
Yeah,
onerous,
very difficult to.
or because nobody really cares.
I think it's that one.
It's one of those two outcomes.
Yeah.
It's not clear which. So the CME futures, which still trade, are cash settled.
Yeah.
ICE also offered futures that were physical settled. You could deliver the coins, take the coins back out. Backed is a custody provider that I'm not sure if they're even still around.
Well, I think they're around, but I don't know what they're
I
doing,
don't know.
to be honest.
But that never really went anywhere. They delisted the futures.
I think the
and
whole
just
concept
stopped.
of deliverable is interesting because, the whole. Okay, so a bit of history here, right? You have a futures contract. It started with the Dojima rice futures exchange in
lots of commodities futures.
in the commodities future exchange in Kyoto, and the whole point of this Osaka, sorry. And so the whole point is this poor Japanese rice farmer, right? He doesn't know what price he's going to get for the rice at the end of the season during the harvest time. So in order to protect himself, he'll sell a rice futures that's deliverable. So somebody else can take the risk and speculate on the price of rice when it eventually happens, and that's how eventually that branches off to samurais and ninjas and stuff like that. But that's a separate story. So the idea is that maybe the guy at the end of the day he wants to take delivery of the rice, whereas I mean if you wanted to take delivery of the Bitcoin, you can just either buy an option. You just go and buy it.
So futures are very helpful for commodities where a degree of standardization and a physically limited delivery specification is very helpful for people. Onions, oil, whatever, lots of stuff gets traded because you have to know what's the location, and the specifications depend on the product. But rice has a way of grading it, oil has a way of grading it,
pork
gold has a way
bellies,
of grading
orange
it, whatever.
juice, all of them. Yeah.
For financial products, there are plenty of deliverable futures out there in the world. I mean, lots of bond futures are deliverable, but nothing really settles into them because there's no benefit for highly standardized electronic products already. So here, introduce this mechanism if that makes people happy, have a good time. But to the extent to which, other than the KYC issue, they're all completely fungible. Right?
Yeah.
You're just erecting a wall to manage the KYC issue somehow. I think there is a very negative way in which to view this, which is if the government is so concerned about the dirtiness of so many of these crypto tokens that they really want to erect a strange and absolutely not common mechanism to separate things, you have to start to wonder how easily you're going to be able to convert those things into dollars at institutions run by people that aren't, incarcerated at some point. Because it says very clearly that they think that there's a cleanliness problem with a lot of the money.
Yeah. No, I think that's...
And you're running out of exchanges that don't have licenses.
Yeah.
So we'll see whether exchanges can get licenses and if they can deal with the people who formerly dealt in the non-licensed exchanges.
That's a tough one.
That is the way I would read that message.
Yeah.
It's interesting times.
And on that note, happy holidays, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a great year. We really enjoyed doing the show. Thank you for comments, the likes, the subscribes, and we will be back probably next year, unless something interesting happens next week, which unlikely. But otherwise, we'll be back next year. Same format. And thank you for watching, and looking forward to seeing you again in the new year. Happy New Year.